Hello, hello. We're here live on Facebook.
Good to have you guys,
Hey, Facebook.
as always.
All right, let's go ahead and start recording our podcast live.
Are cheaters always addicts?
All right, before we answer that, let's read a recent review called A Lighthouse in the Storm. I have been listening to this podcast for almost 2 years and look forward to it every week, especially if it's been a hard week. I can't remember how I found the podcast, but I'm so glad it did because it's given me light during a very dark period of my life. I did not know what betrayal trauma was or any of the terms that come with it, and I did not know how to articulate what I was feeling. But these episodes have made me laugh, cry, and even become upset because the conversations discuss feelings and responses I didn't know I was holding in. Thank you for giving me words to my feelings, struggles, and truth that I could not express. I've shared many podcasts with my partner in hopes of starting a conversation I did not know how to start in the midst of all this. I've enjoyed hearing from guest speakers who also give additional insight, and yet the trio continue to be a voice of hope, empathy, and understanding. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship, but I do know that I'm able to find my truth and rediscover my center and work towards finding myself again due to the help of this podcast. Thank you for sharing and encouraging others to do their own work.
Love it.
Thank you. That
Wow.
was so insightful and thoughtful to spend the time sharing that and what your experience has been. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Not everyone does that. You don't have to do that, but it does help us find the people that are looking for our podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the idea of laughing that she shares laughs with us, I especially like because this whole arena is so intense and it's so tough sometimes. If we can't just take a moment and take a step back and find the humor in some moments, then it's going to be all the more challenging. So I'm glad that she could see that.
Yeah, I I don't know if it's the therapist in me or what, but my favorite part of that review was how we upset her sometimes, and the reason is not because I want her to be upset, but I think us triggering some things in you guys, in the listeners, is a good thing. And I always say to my clients is it's not our job to help you feel good, it's our job to help you get better. And our analogy of the buffalo, for example, like turn at difficult things and face them. So we don't shy away from hard topics, and we don't shy away from triggering topics. And sometimes those triggering topics are things that make some people want to run the other way. So I just applaud you, 2 years hanging in there and knowing that we're going to trigger you. You're going to laugh with us. Just thank you so much. That was an awesome review. So
Agreed. Okay, so Brannon, I get
Yeah.
this question a lot. I hear it actually from more the betrayed side, who reach out and say, we're really struggling to connect in recovery. My spouse had an affair, or maybe even multiple affairs, but the label of your podcast or of doing the work and coming to a specialized therapist of saying I'm an addict is what's keeping them stuck. And
Okay.
so they want to, like, what is the difference? Can I have cheated and not be an addict? Can I be an addict and not cheat?
Well, so let's just start there first. I think it's important to start with the label of an addict, and then we'll get to that question: is everybody who's cheated, are they an addict? The betrayed, the addicted, and the expert. That ed on the end of addict is important, I think, because it differentiates something. I mean, what does it differentiate?
Active addiction versus someone who's recovering.
Yeah, well, I would say this, Coby. I say it differentiates you're addicted to something versus you are an addict. Like, that's what you are. It's more a
identity.
Shame, yeah, a shame identity statement. You are an addict. Boom. That's,
Agree with
well,
that.
you're an addict. You cheated, so now you're an addict. Even Ashlynn, it was interesting. I remember recording this when we did our intro, and you just kind of out of nowhere said, "I'm Ashlynn, the once betrayed," and you took out the label of I'm the betrayed. That's what I am. That's my identity, the betrayed. I think these identities are way more important and critical than we give them credit for. So I just ran a new group last week, and the topic of the group was a person who comes in to treatment and they say, I'm going to be a person in recovery. Like, that's who I am. That's what they create. A person who comes into treatment and they say, I'm an addict and I'm the betrayed, they stay the addict and the betrayed, because that's what they believe they are. And so I think sometimes it feels good to be able to say, well, you cheated, so now you're an addict. That's what you are. Or to say, well, you're just the betrayed. Look how crazy you're acting. See? And so it's kind of easy to throw those labels around.
It also helps make sense, right? Of like these senseless things.
It validates.
Yeah.
It helps make sense. So, and in no way am I saying, let's not call a spade a spade. And in no way am I saying, let's dance around what it actually is. Let's say what it actually is. The truth is I'm just such a believer in recovery. Like I've seen too many people go from just shackled down in their addiction to finding light and freedom and peace and serenity, that I believe in change. And so because of that, I can't stay stuck on a label of the addict or the betrayed.
That is really, really interesting, Brannon, because in all the time that we've spent on this podcast in our own efforts to heal and recover, when we first started until now, I totally know and have experienced the idea of like, hi, my name's Coby, I'm an addict. And yet at the same time, I don't ever recall hearing in any meeting, hi, I'm Coby, I'm recovering.
Yeah. Isn't that profound what you just said? That's really profound.
And
I've heard I'm a recovering addict. I've heard that before.
But look at the duality that lives in that, right? And I just, going back to what you said, as far as identity is concerned, it's a very, very interesting thing to take on an identity, a sentence, a life sentence, if you will. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting identity to take on something that becomes this fetter, right? This ball and chain for which you can't find a key.
Yeah.
Because that's often how it felt whenever I would go to meetings. And once I knew I was like fully engaged in the process of recovering, I'm Coby, I'm recovering. I never said that. I've never said that till just now. It takes on a completely different meaning, but can you see the contrast? My hope is that if you're listening to this right now, if you're listening to this, and if you struggle with addiction, that you'll introduce yourself to yourself and say, hi, I'm Johnny Lunchbucket. I'm recovering.
Well, Coby, I want to just say, you saying this is actually really important. I've seen you personally in your heart make a shift out of this of, it's like I play the role of the douche on the podcast. Like I'm the resident douche,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we laugh about that, but the reality is I play the role of the addict and the douche and it's funny, but at some level it's not funny because that's not who you are.
Yeah,
you
totally.
Play the role of the courageous dude who's willing to talk about his problems. You play the role of the resilient guy who is doing awesome at overcoming an addiction, right? And when you think about it from that context, it's like, yeah, hell yeah, that's who I am, right?
Yeah, completely.
Not I'm the douche. I'm the addict.
I'm the one with the problems.
Because if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
And moreover, let's just break this down. And you've heard me say this countless times on the podcast is guys will come to group where I'll talk with guys one-on-one and they're so down in the mouth because of a relapse that they had, a week ago, or not a week ago, but let's just say just a couple days ago. But their previous relapse was maybe 2 months ago. And then I stop and think, okay, so, and I ask them the question, what percentage-wise, how much of your life is typically spent in addict mode where you're really like acting out. They're like, oh, geez, I don't know, maybe 1-2%. So it's like, okay, so are you going to give yourself the identity of the addict when 1 or 2% of your day is spent in that mindset, literally hijacked? Or are you going to identify the fact that 98 to 99% of your day is spent in healthy living, right? Maybe not the healthiest, but it's not addict mode. And are you going to say, hey, I'm really on this road to recovery? And I think identity has everything to do with what your actions are, right? And the fruit that they bear. But it's a very easy thing, though, to just take that fetter, take that identity, take that title and name, and just say, okay, this is just me, and just come to a consensus that 1 to 2% of my day, or even 5 or 10% of your day, of your month, is spent in there. Okay.
Coby, I want to play devil's advocate just a little bit, which
Do.
is, and it's kind of really, it's in some ways it's kind of the 12-step culture mentality, a little bit of like, okay, if you can't admit you're an addict, then you're in denial. You must have a lot of shame that you're an addict. And, a man in recovery can just be like, yeah, I'm an addict and I'm fine with it. Right. But in order to get better, you need to own that you're powerless over your addiction and own that you are an addict. You are an addict. Own that. I hear that. I hear that argument because I believe me, I see a lot of the other side of it.
Totally.
Of people struggling with addiction who say, I don't really have a problem. I'm good. It's like, really, it's not that bad a thing. But I actually think both can exist. I think you can fully own your problem, fully own what is, and not take on the identity of just being an addict.
Yeah.
I think you can do both. And I think that's the healthiest place to be, and take on the identity of the powerful, accountable human being that you are, as well as be able to own the fact that you've struggled with compulsive, addictive behaviors. I think
which
both can exist.
Which is part of what our topic is today. And we can use this as a transition into it, but it's like, where is it? Do I define myself based upon where my focus is? And if that's the case, and I have accepted the fact that I have this compulsive behavior that for the life of me, I cannot stop, nothing under the heavens has been able to do that, then I got a problem and I have to face it. But once I face it, and then I get busy focusing my mind and my efforts day to day, then I begin to change my trajectory and therefore my path and my identity. But
Right.
to your point, it's I think you can have both for sure. And certainly there has been. I know I was in that place for decades of like, a problem, I don't know.
And that's problematic, to be in that denial place of not owning.
Sure was for
right?
me.
and to transition into the question that we had of a lot of people will say, I don't struggle with an addiction, I just cheated. I happen to cheat 100 times every weekend for 10 years, but I just cheated. And it's like, well, okay, like, where do we differentiate just cheating? And I really don't like that, because that minimizes cheating. I imagine just cheating can trigger some people who've been betrayed and hurt.
For sure.
Where do we differentiate I cheated versus I have an addiction and I'm struggling with addiction? We're talking about this label of addiction. What does it mean to have an addiction? What is the definition of addiction? There's some indicators that we look at for this. And I actually think it's the answer to this question, am I an addict because I cheated, is actually quite obvious if you know what to look for. Do you guys know what to look for?
Tell us.
I just love when they beg me for the answer. It just makes me feel like the expert.
We know nothing.
I'm just kidding. So you're looking for a couple things. You look at rate and duration of use, so and frequency. So how often are you drawn back to these compulsive behaviors? Are you using the behavior, whatever it is, drinking alcohol or masturbating to pornography? Are you using it to numb out and to escape and to avoid feeling emotion? So you're not mindful in that experience. You're actually using it as an escape. Is the tolerance building up? So like with alcohol, that's obvious. Like, okay, I can drink 6 beers in a day, and now I'm drinking 10 to get the same feeling. That's a good sign of addiction there. With sex, it's quite obvious too, but you got to know where to look. You know, I used to look at masturbation, or I used to look at porn and masturbate every day. Now I'm spending 4 hours a day in chat rooms and meeting up with women. That's a whole different ballgame, but you're pushing new limits. You're pushing new risky behaviors to get a hit, to get a rush of dopamine. And sometimes that tolerance buildup over time can be a really slow progression. Sometimes it can be a really fast progression. But all of these things are addictive behaviors. They're showing addiction, right? And so you can cheat and not have those things going on. So the answer to, if I cheated, does that automatically make me an addict? I think we know the answer to that is no, right? But if your addiction has pushed you to do behaviors that you haven't wanted to do, and now you're spilling over into cheating as a result of that addiction, then yes, you're experiencing symptoms of your addiction. Not to excuse that behavior in any way, but you're experiencing addiction. And one of those indicators is that you're participating in those type of behaviors. So am I making sense? Is this
Yes, I'm taking notes over here, Brannon. I'm going to
Oh.
quote you on my social media. So,
Awesome.
So I have a question.
Okay.
I'm the betrayed reaching out and saying, okay, I hear you. And it sounds like my husband he's had one affair. He's cheated. So now what? Because I still feel a lot of the feelings that I describe, right, of betrayal. And so what now? So,
Well,
okay, he's not an addict, but I still hurt.
Ashlynn, I'm so glad you just asked that question. That is an important question, because if your spouse doesn't have an addiction, that doesn't minimize betrayal trauma. You still will have betrayal trauma. All the same similar feelings as somebody who well, there are some differences, I got to say, but you're going to feel a lot of the same feelings that somebody who's experienced betrayal trauma another way is feeling. One of the differences, though, is somebody who goes out and cheats, who doesn't have the addiction. It's hard to say across the board, because they still might gaslight, they still might turn the tables, they still might manipulate in all these other ways and show all of the attachment disorder behaviors, or they might not. Somebody with addiction, I would say, does exhibit most of those attachment disorder behaviors, because there's so much shame there that's driving their addiction that I rarely see an addict be able to have a very healthy relationship, if ever, right? So yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, so they may feel the same, and I've, the last few months have just been calling, instead of saying addiction or I cheated, it's betrayal, because for me, I hear their pain and it sounds the same.
Yeah.
And so yes, there's differences, like you said, but is the work similar for the betrayed and maybe someone who's betrayed?
Parts of it are really similar. So her work of really knowing who she is and loving herself, having boundaries, all of that is the same. The difference is, like for example, I did an intake today where this guy they've been married for 35 years and he's been addicted the whole time. And, an addict, I just used the label, right? Someone struggling with an addiction, they have such compulsive, manipulative behaviors to be able to, I call it do the juggle, where it's, I want to hang on to my spouse, but at the same time, I want to keep my addiction. And in order to do that, I have to do all of these things. I have to do this song and dance that really causes some deep wounds in terms of betrayal trauma. And like I said before, if you're just cheated on and you're not dealing with that juggle that the spouse is doing, the levels of betrayal can be different. So this is hard because across the board, we can't really say. We can't say that, a couple's bumping along, everything's hunky-dory, and then, let's say she goes out and cheats and he has betrayal trauma, and then okay, she just cheated, things are fine, whatever, move on. That's rarely the case, if ever. There's a lot of understory to it. There's a lot of things going on. But I would say one thing to pay attention to is if the cheating is a result of the addiction and the addiction tolerance building up, then the recovery work is going to be addiction recovery work. If the cheating is a result of just low grade disconnection in the marriage and a lack of excitement in life, and then the treatment and the recovery work is going to be much more relational early on than it is about addiction recovery. So,
Brannon, is it possible for a partner who has been betrayed to have a strong sense of self and self-worth, and to have strong boundaries and then be betrayed, and then come into your office and say, okay, my partner cheated on me, and this is devastating. It's not okay with me, and is it possible for the person who was betrayed to have a lesser amount of betrayal trauma from a betrayal of their partner, but have a lesser degree, so it's not as
to handle it better, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I met this woman last week, and as she left my office, I was just blown away by her strength. And her D-Day was 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And she's just, she's grounded. She's
able to separate herself from the actions of her
She's not
partner?
taking it personally. She's not sticking her head in the sand and pretending like it's not happening. So she's not in denial, but she's healthy. And so she's gonna, now that she has this kind of laid in front of her, hopefully she navigates it in a really healthy way. And we know she could end up divorced. She could end up, they could end up really happy together, but So
now, so now what though? Brannon, if we go back to the original question, right? I cheated, but I'm not an addict. So if a couple faces the fact that betrayal's taken place and it's a one-off, maybe it's an affair that was they were found out. Maybe there's another affair that happened maybe years before. Like in my case, for example, years in between. What I'm hearing from you is every case, every situation is different, and it's got to be assessed based upon the contributing factors to the betrayer, the person who's betrayed and cheated, and it also has to do with the factors of the person who was betrayed as well.
Right.
So is there really no what you're saying is there's no canned standard answer.
Yeah, but we're kind of like, some things are beside the point here. Okay. So it's like, if I've been hurt, I've been betrayed, what I don't need is an argument with my spouse about whether or not you have an addiction and we can label it as an addiction or not, or this or that. Like
Okay.
what needs to be heard is the pain.
Pain.
Yeah. Let's step into the pain. Let's empathize. Let's flush that out. Let's process it and let's hear it.
Okay. I hope like what you said, Brandon, right there, you said it just quick and like it was no big deal, but that's a big deal for a lot of people to hear right now, because I think, especially because of the title of our podcast, we do get stuck in those like, but this is what I'm hearing and I'm reading. So this is what you are because I'm feeling these things.
Right.
But I think you've proven you can still feel a lot of those things because you've been betrayed.
Yes.
And in some form or fashion. And the end result is still, you need to heal from that.
Well, and Ashlynn, and when the partner understands that and says, let's say my spouse came to me and said, you're an addict, you're an addict, you're an addict, right? I can turn to her and say, no, I'm not. No, look, I can prove to you, this is why I'm not. Boom, 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 boom. Or I can respond in a way where I love her. I take space and I say, whoa, like for you to be really concerned about whether I'm an addict or not, you must be feeling a lot of fear. Talk to me. I want to hear you. I want to validate why you're feeling that and really understand like where you're coming from. Well, you cheated on me. You hurt me. This is like, yeah. And then validate that like, yeah. And in a real way, not a placating, whatever way, but to sit in that emotion with your partner rather than getting caught up in the weeds about the definition of this or that or whatever. And so that's what starts the process of healing. I do think it's important to be able to call things what they are and to be able to own them for what they are. But I can't, my experience is with my spouse is if I try to force her to see something, she's less likely to take a look at it. Right.
Yes.
But if I am in my own recovery and I can influence her much better. Right. And so, yeah,
it's the same answer we always get, right? Do your own work.
Yeah.
And dang it, it's still the same answer.
Yes.
But it's interesting because I'm hearing this thinking of just different story, right? We had addiction in our relationship from the get-go. But when Coby had that first affair, it was an emotional affair, which I'd love to do an episode on that because I get questions on all that all the time, right? Like they didn't touch, they didn't kiss. Like, why are you so upset about it? And I did have people telling me that, a therapist and a church leader saying, it's not that big a deal. You need to just get over it. And so it became this thing that was absolutely affecting the way I showed up as a partner and as a person. But it was something that we weren't talking about. And it was, it was completely affecting the way that we fought these cyclical fights that I wasn't acknowledging, the roots of the pain. And so I think had I heard this, whether or not we acknowledge the addiction cycle for you with pornography or whatever, the fact that the betrayal hurt and that it was showing up for me years later was a very big indicator. I'm sure it would have, I know it affected me because when I started to learn about betrayal trauma, it was this light bulb moment of this makes sense. No wonder I've been so upset and so.
It's like you found the source of pain.
Yeah.
Yes.
I couldn't put words. It was like the review we read today. I didn't have the words to explain what I was feeling and articulate the pain. Right. And when I found that, it was this whole new world opened up to me. And so the labels did help me for sure move forward. Did I feel stuck in those at times? Yes. Have Coby and I done everything right in recovery? No. Far from it. And we still choose to show up, and sometimes we get it right, and I'm super proud of us. And other times it's like, how are we still messing this up? Like we can't have a hard conversation. But then we do. And so I think the labels absolutely can help. They can also keep us stuck. Either way, there's pain underneath that.
And that's the idea that you're talking about, Brannon, which is, okay, so let's just take this bag of labels. Let's set it aside and let's focus on what's the real result of this betrayal. And
Yeah.
let's give both parties an opportunity to see the whole picture and not allow the label to be the battle, because even trying to debate and split hairs on does it apply, does it not apply, totally negates the ability for the betraying partner to feel and to see the pain that they've caused.
Yeah. It's interesting, you know, we like EMDR and trauma work. And what's interesting about EMDR is it's therapy that helps remove the therapist's ego and the therapist like analytical thinking. And it's therapy that actually takes a client into a heart space, into like healing their soul. And it's the same concept happens with couples in recovery. Is our heads, our egos get way too caught up in everything. Is it an addiction? Is it not an addiction? Is it cheating? Is it? But what are both of your hearts saying? And where are both of your hearts at? And can you actually have the strength and the courage and the love to connect to your partner's heart and hold that space for them? And that's where a relationship actually turns into an asset for the healing process. When your heads are too involved, the relationship's a liability, and it becomes toxic. So
I need to re-listen so I can quote that, because I'm hearing that and thinking, well, that fits when we talk about what's the difference between sobriety and recovery as
totally.
well. We get stuck in, well, crap, and I think they're just sober and they're white knuckling.
Sobriety's ego-based, heady based. Yeah.
Wow.
Recovery is heart-based. Yeah.
I love that.
Lots here. And we hope that those of you who are listening heard something that stirred you. And we hope that for those of you who are listening, thinking like, yes, that's it. We hope that whatever you heard will lead you to connecting, even if it is over the extraordinary and devastating pain of betrayal. And if you have been the one who has betrayed and you're hearing this, hear me when I say, it is possible for you to sit in the pain that you've caused your partner. And it's possible for you to face it and heal from it. And if you can listen and if you can try to understand where they're coming from and not try to run away, but just own it, that can facilitate enormous healing. Whether or not you stay together is another thing, but that can contribute to enormous healing, which will help both of you, no matter what your circumstances are.
Yeah. And if you're here for the first time or for the millionth time and just need that next step, we do have a free next step for you over at beyond-enough.com/step1. And it's the number 1.
Yep.
All right.
Awesome, you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Have a good day. We'll see ya.
Bye-bye.